All right, so we are going to move on to the next couple sections, and we're going to actually do them together. So I think collecting like terms and algebraic products or multiplying terms can go hand in hand, and doing them together will also show you the difference when we're doing them. So our last two sections for chapter 1 before we have our first test, we'll be collecting like terms and then multiplying terms together. Remember, you need to write down the objectives, and our objectives for this video first is we're going to add or subtract like terms. This should be a review, so you should all already have this already. But if not, and you're struggling, we can go through it, and hopefully we can work this out together. And then our second section that we will be covering within this video is going to be multiplying terms together. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, the first thing that we're going to do is do collecting like terms. And we've already talked about terms extensively in class in section A. By the way, I was teaching you how to do that. Remember, I was having you circle the addition signs, and that was telling us our terms, and we were combining everything between the addition and subtraction signs. Well, that was each one of those was a term. So the term or the terms of an expression are algebraic forms separated by plus and minus signs, and the signs being included, meaning when it's minus 2xy, it's a negative number. It's negative 2xy. When it's positive 3xy, it's a positive number. So that's what they mean by the signs are included. And like terms are terms which contain the same variables to the same indices. They have to be identical. Right? One of the questions we went over in class was something like 3ab squared plus ab plus b. And some people wanted to add these together, but none of these were identical terms. All right, yes, this has an a, this has an a. This has a b, and this has a b. So some people thought, well, they're like terms. No, because the b has a square here, and this b does not. So in order for them to be like terms, all of the variables, disregard the numbers in the beginning, but all of the variables have to be identical. All right, so someone also was looking at this and saying, well, we had, sorry, let me rewrite that again, that we had an a, b, and we had a b. So this b is identical to this b, so they wanted to add them together. Same thing, they are not truly identical because this b is missing the a out front that the other one has. So in order for them to be like terms for us to add or subtract, they have to be identical. All right, so let's just go through. There's a quick example that they give us. 2a minus 3a. They expand it out because we can rewrite 2a as a plus a. And then we can rewrite minus 3a as minus a, minus a, minus a. By no means would I ever really want you to do that. When they are like terms, we can just take our coefficients, so the numbers in front of our variables, and we write them as adding or subtracting out front. So 2 minus 3. And then whatever variable we have, whatever our term is, the variable, we just write it at the end. And then 2 minus 3 we know is equal to negative 1. So it's negative 1a, or you can just write negative a. This is the way I would like to see you do this. It's very beneficial later on when we start dealing with, or next year when you start dealing with imaginary numbers or things like that. But it's another way that you can do it. So you don't have to expand it out like this here. You can just rewrite it like I did and then just solve the addition or subtraction in the parentheses. All right, so let's go ahead. There's a few examples for this section C, and let's get them done real quick. All right, so we're going to go through these kind of quickly. But the first one, we have x and x. We know that they are the exact same. They are identical, so they are like terms. So I can go ahead and add what's out front. 4 plus 3, and I know it's going to be multiplied by my variable x, and that is simply 7x. All right, the next one, we have y and y. They are identical. They are the exact same terms, so we can add or subtract these. So we can do 5 minus 2 multiplied by our variable, and 5 minus 2 is 3, so it is 3y. Right, this one's a little bit different because if you see, we have an a and we have an a, so those two are like terms. However, this one does not have a variable. That is a constant. So that minus 1 cannot be combined with any of the a's because they are not identical. So the first thing that we can do then is we can rewrite our like terms 2 plus 1 because that's what's understood to be in front of here, a, and then we can write the minus 1 at the end because we cannot actually add or subtract that 1 since it is not like terms with the a. And 2 plus 1 we know is equal to 3, so this simplifies to 3a minus 1. All right, here we have mn and mn. Both the m's are raised to the first power. Both the n's are raised to the first power, so they are like terms. This has a coefficient of 1, so we can rewrite it as 1 minus 2 mn, and 1 minus 2 is equal to negative 1 mn, or you can just simply write negative mn. And then our last one, when we look here, we have an a squared, and this one is an a. It does not have the power of 2 like we do over here. So therefore, these are not like terms. So on your test, if you just leave it blank, you won't get credit. You either have to rewrite the question because that is your final answer, or you can say cannot be simplified. All right, either way would be acceptable. If you just left it blank, though, you would not get any credit. All right, I know I went through these kind of quickly, but hopefully this is a review for all of you. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to the last part, section D, where we'll first talk about multiplying terms, and then I think there's 2 or maybe 3 questions that we'll go through. All right, when you're multiplying terms, it's actually a lot easier than when you are adding them. Because when you're multiplying, it doesn't matter if they're like terms or not. You just simply multiply. So the product of 2 or more factors is the result obtained by multiplying them together. So unlike when you're adding or subtracting like terms where you have to think, are these the same? And are all of our powers the same? Are all the variables the same? In this case, you don't really have to worry about that. You can just simply multiply everything together. And here's the steps that the book suggests that you should be doing. Our first step is to simply find the product of the signs. We had a negative and a positive, and we know anytime we have a negative times a positive, it will give us a negative number. So I know when I multiply these 2 terms together, it'll be negative. Right? Then we multiply. So step 2 is we find the product of the numbers or the numerals. So our coefficients, that's the way I would prefer to hear you guys talk about this, is your coefficients. So we will then find the product of our coefficients. In this case, we have 3 and we have 2. And we know 3 times 2 gives me 6. And then the last part that we have to do, step 3, is we find the product of the variables or the letters. So if they are not the same variable, we simply just write whatever we had before. If they are the same variable, like here, x and x squared, but x and x, so we have the same variable, then we need to multiply these 2 together. And we know x times x gives us x cubed. Hopefully at this point you guys would have learned this, but this x is understood to have a power of 1. And anytime you multiply bases that or whenever you're multiplying exponents that have the same base, which means x and x, we simply add our powers together. So it becomes x to the 1 plus 2 power, which is then equal to x cubed, which is how we got this final part here. All right, so we just multiply the signs, multiply the numbers, and then multiply the variables. It's easier, I think, than when you're adding or subtracting because there's no thinking that goes on beforehand. You simply just do it. All right, I think there's 3 examples we'll go through, and that's it for this video. All right, so the first thing that we do, remember, is we multiply our signs. So I'm going to do these step by step. So we have our sign of a positive and a sign of a negative, so we know it's going to give us a negative value. So I'll put this down here. All right, then we move to multiply our coefficients. So our first coefficient is 2. Our second one is 1, and we know 2 times 1 is equal to 2, so we know it's going to give us minus 2. And then we multiply our power, or our variables, x times x squared, as we just did in the very last example. We would add our power of 1 with our power of 2, and that will give us x cubed. So we know that 2x times negative x squared is equal to negative 2x cubed. All right, here we have a negative times a negative, and anytime we multiply 2 negatives, that gives us a positive number. I'm not going to write positive here because if we just have a standalone term, you don't have to write positive. If there's no negative sign written, it's understood to be positive. Right? Then we'll multiply our coefficients. So 4 times 2 is equal to 8. So now I have a positive 8. Here I just have an a, and there's no other a that's being multiplied, so it's 8a. And then I have b times b squared. Same thing as with our x variable. This is understood to have a power of 1. So when it's the same base, we add our powers together. So 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. So it's 8ab cubed. All right, this last one, you have to be aware of something. This is being separated by a minus sign. And when we have something being separated by a minus or plus sign, we know we have separate terms. So here is one term that we will multiply together. And here is the other term that we will multiply together. All right, so be aware, just like we did in section A, we can have multiple terms. So in this case, we have a positive times a positive, and that will then give me a positive number. We have 5 times 1, which is then going to be equal to 5. We have s times s, so when it's understood to have a power of 1, so 1 plus 1 will give us s squared, and then we just have a t, so it's just 5s squared t. Right? This next part, we have a negative times a positive, so it's going to give us a negative number. So I know it's going to be minus. We have a 2 times a 3, so I know that's going to be equal to 6, so it's minus 6. Here we have an s squared. There's no s in this term, so it's not being multiplied to anything, so it's s squared. And here we have a t, and this doesn't have a t, so it's just 6s squared t. Right now, something should hopefully jump out at you that we were just doing. These are the exact same variables, st squared. So these are like terms. So we can then go ahead and we can add or subtract our coefficients. So it will become 5 minus 6 s squared t. 5 minus 6 is negative 1. And you don't have to write the negative 1. You can just write negative s squared t. And that will be your final answer. All right, that is it for this video.